It started as a whisper, a faint hum, too low to be recognized by the average human ear. Most dismissed it as static, a side effect of the newly launched communications satellites in orbit. But Dr. Iris Vance, an astrophysicist with a penchant for detail, noticed something peculiar about the frequency. It wasn't random noise or cosmic radiation. It was a signal, intentional, and most disturbingly, it seemed to be getting stronger. Iris had worked for years in the field of deep space communication, studying radio waves from distant stars and galaxies. Yet nothing had prepared her for this. The signal was coming from somewhere within the solar system, somewhere close enough to pose a question. Who, or what, was trying to communicate? When she first reported her findings to the global scientific community, they laughed it off. A few dismissed it as a glitch in the software. Others thought it was just an anomalous reading, and a few conspiracy theorists went wild, claiming it was evidence of alien life. Iris knew better, though. She wasn't some UFO enthusiast. She was a scientist. She needed answers. After weeks of scanning and filtering the noise, she pinpointed its origin. A small, seemingly insignificant asteroid, orbiting the outer reaches of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It wasn't just any asteroid, though. This one had an odd, perfectly symmetrical shape, something nature didn't tend to create. It was as if the object had been engineered, and it was transmitting. "Dr. Vance, are you sure about this?" Her colleague, Dr. Lyle Marcus, asked one evening as they reviewed the data together. "This could be a disaster waiting to happen. You're talking about a signal that shouldn't exist." "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady. "And I'm going to find out who or what is sending it." With no time to waste, Iris put together a team of experts and secured a high-priority mission to investigate the asteroid. The best spacecraft available, the Ares-7, would be dispatched to track down the source of the strange transmission. The mission was risky. Resources for deep space exploration were limited, and even a slight error could lead to disaster. But Iris insisted. This was her discovery, and she would not let it go unexamined. The team, though hesitant, supported her. They knew this could be a turning point for humanity, either a groundbreaking revelation or a catastrophic mistake. As the Ares-7 set its course toward the asteroid, Iris couldn't shake the feeling that something more than just a signal was waiting for them. They were about to cross a line, to peer into a part of the universe that had remained silent for millennia. But there was no turning back now. The unknown beckoned, and humanity had never been afraid of it before. Days turned into weeks, and the crew of the Ares-7 worked tirelessly, monitoring the asteroid's strange pulse.
Iris, however, couldn't focus entirely on the mission. She had started noticing subtle irregularities in the signal. It was evolving, subtly shifting in frequency and rhythm, as though it was responding to their attempts to decode it. The realization hit her hard. Whatever was sending the signal was intelligent. The asteroid itself seemed to be a key, an instrument perhaps to unlock a larger puzzle. But why had it waited so long to reveal itself?
And more importantly, who or what was waiting on the other end of that signal? The closer the Ares-7 came to the asteroid, the more unsettling the transmission became. It was no longer a simple hum or pulse. The frequency patterns were changing in intricate, complex ways, almost as if they were following a rhythm. The crew began to speculate that the signal was not only a form of communication, but also an invitation. Iris stood before the vast window of the ship's command deck, gazing out into the dark void of space, the asteroid now a massive rock in the distance. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, and though she was accustomed to the silence of space, this time it felt different. There was something lurking in the silence, a waiting presence. "We're entering the asteroid's orbit." Lyle's voice broke her concentration. "Should we deploy the probe now?" "Not yet," Iris said, her eyes still fixed on the dark rock. "Wait until we're within range to send a direct signal back. I want to see how it reacts." The decision was risky, but Iris had a gut feeling that it was the only way to understand what was truly happening. As the ship drifted closer, she initiated a low-frequency pulse of her own. hoping to communicate with whatever intelligence had created the signal. The response came almost immediately. The asteroid's hum grew louder, faster. A rapid sequence of pulses filled the cabin. Then, silence. Iris stared at the readings on the screen. Something had shifted in the asteroid's pattern, something unmistakable. They weren't alone. Not anymore. The moment the signal shifted, the crew of the Ares 7 became acutely aware of their surroundings. The ship's systems began behaving erratically. Lights flickered, sensors momentarily went dark, and an eerie hum reverberated through the hull. The pulse from the asteroid had begun to resonate with the ship's systems. "This is bad," Lyle muttered, trying to stabilize the controls. "The signal is affecting the ship." Iris remained calm. "It's not attacking us," she said. "It's trying to make contact. Something is happening." The hum intensified, rising in pitch and volume. It felt as though the ship itself was vibrating, caught in a cosmic dance with the unknown. The crew members exchanged anxious glances, unsure of whether they were witnessing a breakthrough or a trap. Then, with a sudden burst, the signal stopped altogether. For a moment, the entire crew held their breath. "What the hell just happened?" Lyle whispered. Iris's eyes were fixed on the screens. Then, the asteroid did something it had never done before. It shifted. Slowly, impossibly slowly, it began to rotate. As it turned, a hidden structure emerged from beneath its surface, an enormous metallic shape, unlike anything ever seen before. It was as if the asteroid itself was an ancient dormant machine waking up after eons of slumber. The discovery of the structure on the asteroid sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Iris and her team, still aboard the Ares 7, were now in a race against time. They needed to understand the purpose of the artifact before it was too late. The metallic structure had not only revealed itself, it had activated. In the command center of the Ares 7, Iris was preparing to make the final decision. The structure was now clearly visible, covered in alien symbols that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the signal. Every instinct in her told her this wasn't just a piece of technology. It was something far older, far more complex. And it was waiting for them. "We have to approach it," Iris said, her voice steely. "We've come this far. We need to see what it can do." The crew was divided. Some were eager, their curiosity piqued by the unprecedented discovery. Others were nervous, sensing that they were tampering with forces far beyond their understanding. As they sent out a drone to investigate, the structure responded. A low, guttural noise filled the ship as the asteroid's surface began to break apart, revealing hidden chambers beneath. The drone's cameras transmitted back images of the interior, a labyrinth of corridors, strange machinery, and a central chamber that seemed to pulse with energy. "This isn't just an artifact," Lyle said, his voice shaking. "It's a weapon." Iris's pulse quickened as she analyzed the data from the drone. The artifact had once been dormant, but now it seemed to be waking up. What was it meant to do? And who, or what, had left it behind? Before she could voice her concerns, a loud crack echoed through the ship. The signal had changed again. It was no longer just a simple hum. It was a sharp, discordant noise. The frequency was higher now, almost painful to the ears. "We're losing control of the ship's systems," Lyle shouted, his hands frantic on the controls. Panic swept through the crew as systems began to fail. The communication relay shut down, and the ship's engines sputtered. The artificial gravity flickered on and off. Whatever had been dormant in the asteroid was now fully awake, and it was clear that it didn't want to be disturbed. "We need to get out of here," Lyle said, his voice now tinged with fear. Iris, however, couldn't bring herself to leave. The artifact was too important. They were on the brink of discovering something monumental, something that could change humanity's understanding of the universe. But as the ship continued to struggle, she realized with sudden horror that they might have made their first mistake. The signal wasn't just a message. It was a warning. The Ares 7 continued to shudder and groan under the influence of the signal. The crew scrambled to regain control, but nothing worked. The systems that had once been at their fingertips were now beyond reach. They had triggered something, and now they were paying the price. The ship drifted helplessly toward the asteroid, caught in the gravitational pull of the strange object. Each moment felt like an eternity as the crew braced for impact. Iris, staring out into the void, couldn't help but wonder if this was what humanity had always feared, an encounter with something far more advanced and powerful than they could ever comprehend. "Get ready," Lyle's voice broke through her thoughts. "We need to land on the asteroid. Now." The order was given. The crew had no choice but to prepare for the unknown. As they descended, the surface of the asteroid grew closer, revealing more of its strange, alien architecture. They were about to land in the heart of something ancient, and they had no idea what they would find there. The Ares 7 made a rough landing on the asteroid's surface, sending a tremor through the hull. The crew had no time to celebrate their survival, however. They scrambled to put on their spacesuits and prepare for the exploration of the alien structure. Iris was the first to step out of the airlock, followed closely by Lyle and the rest of the team. They moved cautiously, the surface of the asteroid uneven and jagged. The eerie glow of the structure loomed in the distance, pulsating with the same rhythmic hum that had been transmitting from within the asteroid for weeks. The air was thin, and the gravity was weaker than Earth's, making movement sluggish. Iris led the way, her eyes focused on the towering entrance to the structure. As they approached, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The entrance was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was perfectly symmetrical, with smooth walls carved from an unknown material that shimmered faintly under their lights. There were no visible doors or windows, yet as they drew near, the structure seemed to respond. A low vibration filled the air, and the once solid wall parted, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Without a word, Iris motioned for the team to follow. The silence was palpable as they stepped inside, the walls closing behind them with a sound that was almost welcoming. The corridor stretched ahead, lit by soft, pulsing lights embedded in the walls. "Do you feel that?" Lyle asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It's like the ship's signal. It's coming from here." Iris nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's not just a signal anymore. It's alive." The group ventured deeper into the structure, the air growing colder and the hum of the walls growing louder. Finally, they reached a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched high above them, too far to see. In the center of the room stood a massive cylindrical object, covered in intricate alien symbols. "What is this?" one of the crew members whispered, awe in their voice. Iris approached the object cautiously, her eyes scanning the symbols. They were unlike anything in human history, the language of an intelligence so advanced that it defied comprehension. Her fingers brushed the surface of the cylinder, and immediately, the symbols began to shift and rearrange, as if reacting to her touch. The hum from the walls grew deafening, and suddenly, the cylinder opened, revealing a dark interior. A strange glowing light emitted from within, casting long shadows across the chamber. As the crew stood frozen, unsure of what to do next, the light flickered and grew stronger. Then, the shape of a figure began to emerge from the glow. It was not human. The figure was tall and ethereal, its form made of shimmering light and energy. It seemed to be a projection, yet somehow it felt real. The figure stood before them, its presence overwhelming. "Welcome," a voice echoed through the chamber, not in words, but in a deep, resonant thought that filled their minds. The figure's voice reverberated within Iris's mind, and she felt a wave of emotions she couldn't name. It was as though the being was not merely communicating, but was reaching into her very soul. "You are the first to awaken us," the figure said, its form shifting and flickering with strange energy. "You have disturbed the slumber of the ancient ones." Iris felt a cold chill crawl down her spine. The being's words held an unmistakable weight. It wasn't just talking about the artifact, it was speaking about something much older, something buried in the asteroid for eons. "The signal you have followed," the figure continued, "was not meant for you. It was a warning." Iris stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. "A warning? From whom? And what is this place?" "This is not a place," the being replied. It is a prison, a containment, and you, humans, have opened the door. Iris felt her knees go weak as the weight of its words sank in. Whatever this structure was, it was not merely a piece of technology. It was a prison, and they had unwittingly released something far beyond their understanding. The figure's form flickered, and for a moment it seemed to dissolve into the light, only to reassemble into a new shape. "You should not have come," it warned. "The Ancient Ones will return, and they will destroy." Panic spread through the crew as the full implications of the being's words began to sink in. They hadn't just discovered an alien artifact, they had triggered something far more dangerous. "What are the Ancient Ones?" Lyle asked, his voice shaky with fear. "They are the ones who built this prison," the figure explained. "They are the ones who created the signal you followed. They are coming, and they will destroy all who stand in their way." Iris's mind raced. She had known they were stepping into the unknown, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. They had unleashed something far older, far more dangerous than anything humanity had encountered. The hum in the walls grew louder, almost deafening now. The light from the figure flickered again, and the room seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. "Leave," the figure said, its voice sharp now, "before it is too late." The crew scrambled to retreat, but the path they had come through seemed to have changed. The corridor was now a maze of shifting walls, and no matter which direction they turned, the passageways seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The ship's communication systems were completely dead. They were trapped. "Get to the surface," Iris shouted. "We need to get back to the Ares 7. Now!" They ran, but the walls seemed to close in around them, the structure growing alive, responding to their every movement. It was as though the asteroid itself had become an entity, rejecting their presence. The air grew thick and suffocating, and the team was forced to move faster, fighting against the overwhelming sense of dread. As they reached what they hoped was an exit, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath their feet began to shake violently. "Run!" Lyle shouted, but the tremors were growing stronger. The asteroid was starting to collapse around them. The team managed to reach the surface, only to find that the RE-7 was no longer where they had left it. The ship had been moved, lifted off the surface of the asteroid, and was now drifting into the void. "What the hell happened?" Lyle shouted, his voice filled with panic. Iris could barely comprehend what she was seeing. The asteroid itself had begun to transform. The structure within was no longer a dormant machine. It was active, and it was reshaping the entire object. Whatever the Ancient Ones had intended, it was happening now. The asteroid was becoming something else entirely. "The signal," Iris whispered, her mind racing. "It's not just a message. It's a beacon. It's calling them back." The figure's warning echoed in her mind, and for the first time Iris understood its true meaning. The Ancient Ones were not just destroyers. They were coming to reclaim what they had lost. As the asteroid shifted and changed, strange shadows began to appear in the distance, massive shapes moving through the darkness of space. Iris's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit her. "They're here," she muttered. The shadows were growing larger, and as they neared the asteroid, they revealed their true form. Gigantic ships, shaped like the figure they had encountered but on an unimaginable scale, were descending toward them. They were not coming to make contact. They were coming to destroy. Iris's breath caught in her throat. The Ancient Ones had returned, and they would not show mercy. The Ares 7 was drifting in space, vulnerable and exposed. The massive ships of the Ancient Ones surrounded the asteroid, their presence suffocating. A low hum filled the air. This was not the hum of communication. It was the hum of a weapon being activated. The crew knew there was no escape. The asteroid had become the epicenter of something far beyond their understanding, and they had no means of stopping it. The Ancient Ones had returned to reclaim what was once theirs. Iris stood at the observation window, staring into the vastness of space. Her mind raced, but she knew there was no way out. They had made the mistake of awakening the Ancient Ones, and now humanity would pay the price. In the distance, The first of the massive ships fired, sending a pulse of energy toward the asteroid. The energy blast hit the structure, causing it to explode in a burst of light and debris. The ship shook violently as the shockwave reached them, and Iris's heart sank as she realized that this was only the beginning. The explosion sent shockwaves through the Ares 7, and for a moment, everything was silent. The crew was disoriented, the ship spinning uncontrollably in the void. Iris clung to the control panel, trying to stabilize the ship. The asteroid was gone, reduced to rubble in a single blast. The Ancient Ones had wiped it out without hesitation. But the silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the alien ships had stopped, and the once powerful signal had faded. The crew was left in the cold, empty silence of space, unsure if they had been spared or if they were simply waiting for the inevitable. Back on Earth, the world was in turmoil. The discovery of the asteroid and its contents had been broadcast across the globe. Nations scrambled to understand what had happened, but they couldn't make sense of it. The Ares 7 was lost, and the signal had ceased. Iris, Lyle, and the rest of the crew had become infamous, branded as the ones who had triggered the return of the Ancient Ones. No one knew if they were dead or alive. They were simply gone. As weeks passed, the world adapted to the silence. The strange signal that had once captured humanity's attention had faded into history, but something had changed. There was a lingering fear, a sense of unease, as if humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The Ancient Ones had made their presence known, and the quiet that followed felt more like a temporary reprieve than a permanent peace. But somewhere, in the far reaches of space, the hum had started again. And this time it wasn't coming from the asteroid. It was coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. Humanity's first mistake had been made, but the consequences were just beginning. No one knew what happened to the Ares 7. The crew's disappearance was shrouded in mystery, and with it, any hope of answers. The Ancient Ones had left their mark, but their motives were unclear. Had they come to destroy, or had they simply been awakened, their wrath an inevitable response to their imprisonment? The world waited in silence, wondering if the worst had truly passed. Years passed, and the signal faded from public memory. But Iris's warning remained etched in the minds of those who had heard her words. The signal that shouldn't have existed had been a mistake, and humanity had paid the price. Yet in the darkest corners of space, something stirred. The Ancient Ones were still out there, waiting, watching, and waiting for the next signal to be sent, and humanity would have to live with the knowledge that they had been the ones to wake them.